Welcome to the Eagle Valley Model Railroad. This is the second video of us building the new addition. We're going to go over cutting and putting down the 2-inch foam, plus we're going to add us a fascia. For the skirting, we're using a polyester blend, and basically we're just going to staple it in place around the layout, making sure that the bottom just barely touches the floor. What we have here is we've decided to put a shelf under the layout on this end. We've already got the fascia up, which you can tell, and we're just going to go through the process of what we did here. So first step, we're gonna wrap this 2x with some of the fabric. And the reason we went with a polyester blend is because it's just a little bit heavier than a t-shirt material. This basically came from a fabric store on a roll, and I told the lady that was working there how much fabric I needed or wanted, and she cut it to length, and it was relatively inexpensive. And it staples well. The staples doesn't pull through, and it holds up pretty well. The reason for this is we put a shelf in this side of the layout, and I needed access to the shelf. So we're just going to bend over the fabric, fold it at the edge of the 2x, get it in place. And you can't tell, I didn't film it for some reason, but I put straight pins in to hold the fold. And we're just going to use some white glue, and we're going to glue the seam over. I was testing this out to just see how it worked, and I did a test piece and it worked out pretty well. So I went with the main layout with it, and I still have my safety pins in, or straight pins in. Let it dry for a little while, and then I removed the straight pins, and it seemed to hold just fine. So how we're going to keep this down is we're just going to add us a strip of Velcro. It's self-adhesive on one end, but just to hold it in place to make sure it stays, of course, we're going to staple it in position. Fabric's still in the process of drying. You can see it's wet, but it was dry enough where I could handle it without messing it up. And we're going to add the other piece of the Velcro to the fabric here. Just press it in place. Make sure everything lines up like we like it. And peel it off ever so slightly so the self-adhesive will stick to our drape right there. And we're just going to use a household stapler to ensure that the Velcro strip stays in place on the flap. This also allowed it to dry in this position, which I think helped it as well. And this is what we have. We have a flap that we can lift up, access the storage underneath the layout, and we can put it back down, and it blends in pretty well, I think. Good addition to the layout. So we're going to take our 2-inch foam board and we're going to lay it on the table. We're going to line up our back edge and make sure it's square to the existing layout. Then all we're going to do is take us a pencil and make our marks to give us our reference lines for when we're cutting. These don't have to be deep marks, just something enough so we can see when we get ready to cut the foam board. We're going to be using a jigsaw to do our cutting, and this blade is long enough to go all the way through that board. The finer the teeth on that blade, the better the cut you're going to have, but this seemed to do just fine. It cuts right through this foam board with no issues. And it's a relatively square cut. Plus at your corners, it'll plunge right in there. Just trying not to cut my sawhorses marking it with my finger, and don't cut your finger. Gonna finish off this cut right here and show y'all what it looks like being cut with that jigsaw. Does a pretty good job. Do a little bit of sanding to clean up the edges, but it's ready to go on the layout. Just a dry fit, make sure everything's like we want it. Everything seems to look and line up just right. And now we're going to glue it down. We're going to be using a foam friendly adhesive. It's a Proline 300 foam board adhesive. It's made by Loctite. Got it at the big box store. Just going to spread this stuff out all over the plywood, everywhere your foam board is going to be contacting. Be generous with this stuff. Just put it everywhere. We're going to make sure that corner of the board's good and secured, so we're going to put some extra. And then just take your putty knife and spread out your adhesive. This knocks down the lumps and makes it where it's not wavy. Plus it just gives you a little bit more surface area for the adhesive to stick to the board and your foam. Make sure everything's spread out. And we're going to put our foam board in place. Get everything lined up. And what we're going to do here is we're going to put some downward pressure, plus we're going to slide it back and forth. It's just making sure we're pressing it down into the adhesive, making sure we have a good bond, lining everything up like we want it. And we're going to put some pieces of plywood down just to disperse the weight as we put our dumbbells in place. This way we don't dimple the foam. You want it to be as smooth as it can be. Get a little spare piece here for this corner. We're just going to mark it. And we're going to cut it. Dry fit and glue it in place. We did put a little bit of glue or adhesive on the face. And we're just going to make sure that stays in place with these push pins. And we're just going to leave those in there long enough for it to start curing a little bit. They don't have to stay in there the whole time till it's dry. We're using this masonite sheeting for our fascia. It's pretty flimsy stuff, so we're going to build us a cutting rail. It's going to frame this up and make it a little bit more rigid for us. We've allotted for the width of the base of the skill saw. So we want us a 8-inch fascia, and we've measured our rail to like 9 1/16. Put us a weight right there so the center board don't droop. We're going to make sure our blade's not too deep, and we're going to rip this masonite down. And you can see how flimsy this stuff is. And we got us an 8-inch wide piece, which is exactly what we're wanting. It's kind of tough to do this by yourself, but I do have some squeeze clamps that I'm going to be using. We'll get these push pins out of the way here. And this don't have to be perfect right this second. We're just trying to get this up in the air so we can work with it. You can see when I pull it to the edge, it's going to pull it out of the corner. Not a big deal. We're going to be making some multiple adjustments right here until we get it just like we want it. Come down to this end and get it just a little bit closer. Still not exactly where we want it, but again, we're just making fine adjustments. We're going to measure a 1/2 inch lip all the way across the top of the layout and adjust as we need to. Just take your time. It's a little bit aggravating, but you'll be pleased with the end results if you just take your time with it. We're going to measure down 3 inches And we're doing these a foot apart. And we're using 3/4 inch screws with a finish washer. And it just makes for a nice look once you get done. We are using a number 50 drill bit to pre-drill holes just to keep from splitting our 1-bys. And as we put screws, we can move our clamps down just to make sure everything lines up just exactly like we want it. And again, these finish washers make this look very nice when we get done with it. Just double checking yourself along the way. And right here, this is where we put those extra pieces of support in the corner. Just trying to find those pieces. And that way we can drill into them and sink us a screw. These won't be exactly 12 inches apart, but it's close enough to where it doesn't look odd, but it's going to hold our material just like we want it. So with the fascia on, we're going to fill in the gaps from the foam and the fascia, and we're using the same foam adhesive. Just spread you some out to fill in those gaps, and take your finger and smooth out the foam. The foam adhesive. Putting some weight in the corners just to keep the corners squared up until the adhesive can cure. It makes for a nice corner when it's all said and done. Let it cure overnight and then just sand away the rough edges. Doesn't have to be too much sanding, but it just helps. We're also sanding the joint where the foam meets together, just so we have a good transition. Vacuum it all up to get all the little pieces up to have us a clean surface to paint. And we're just using a flat brown paint. I don't even know what the name of it is. It's just an earth tone, just to get rid of all the pink ocean that we had laid out here. For the mountain, we're going to paint it for right now. At the time, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Was thinking about taking it down and redoing it. Sparky 107 give me an idea to put a backdrop on it. Since this is going to be a yard area, to make it a warehouse, an industry, an extension to the yard, something of that nature. I like that idea, so that's what we're going to go with. And this just finish off the look and just makes it look a lot cleaner, a lot nicer. Cheap paint, doesn't have to be anything expensive. Thanks for watching. Remember, like, share, subscribe, and until next time, happy modeling.